Hi everyone, I'm Karen Richardson and I'm going to take you through my analysis of Mozart's Clarinet Concerto Third Movement. In this presentation we'll have just enough time to touch on the major points of the form, but before that I want to give you just a little bit of historical context to the piece. This piece was written in the last weeks of Mozart's life, and it was written for a virtuoso clarinet player, Anton Stadler. It was performed in October of 1791, just 7 weeks before Mozart died. And this piece is an excellent example of sonata rondo form, particularly used by Mozart in the last part of his life and said to be developed by him. So, as we know, sonata rondo form is really a combination of sonata form and rondo form. The difference here is that the form of a sonata rondo has an A section, then B, then another A, then right in the middle is a C section, and then that's followed by another A, B, A section. And that last A section sometimes functions as a coda. So let's now take a look at the Clarinet Concerto and how that all fits with the form in its typical model state. This piece begins right off the bat with the rondo theme. No introduction, just straight into the theme, and it's a really lovely, sprightly, delightful tune that is a very concise 8 measures, a very tight-knit period form. Let's take a listen to that now. The opening theme ends with a perfect authentic cadence, and that is really a requirement for the main theme of a rondo. It's very well designed to be repeated throughout the entire movement. Throughout this first section, the solo and orchestral passages really seem to be in dialogue with one another, with the soloist responding with slightly more virtuosic passages than the orchestra plays. The theme is heard 3 times in this opening refrain and is followed by additional material that leads to a closing theme. And that closing theme ends with a very strong, authentic cadence, and it will return later in the movement. So let's take a listen to it so you can recognize when we hear it later. That closing theme marks a very definite end to that opening A section, also known as the refrain. And then we're straight into the B section with a lovely, more lyrical theme that can be seen as a subordinate theme. And here is that theme. That theme was another 8-measure theme, but this time it ended in a half cadence, unlike the rondo theme that we heard at the beginning that ends in an authentic cadence. And it moves into the dominant in the B section, into E major, and then the A section returns just as it did in the very beginning with the theme played by the soloist. This A section is interesting because it's quite short. It's only 24 measures long. 8 measures is devoted to the theme. The next 8 measures were right into that same closing theme from the first refrain that you heard earlier. And then the next 8 measures have a modulation that starts to tell us as a listener something new is happening. And that something new is that we head into the C section. And there's another theme there that's really referred to as an interior theme, not the initial rondo theme, not the subordinate theme, but something right in the center of this piece that is a little different than it was before. By now we've modulated to the relative minor of F sharp minor, and let's hear that interior theme. Often the interior theme, or the C section, moves into the subdominant. And although the theme is in F sharp minor of this C section, the section itself does move into the subdominant. So we end up in D major, and then the A theme comes back for its second return. But if you're not listening carefully, you might just think that it's Mozart alluding slightly to this theme without really giving it its full due. And in fact, that is what happens, but it's still really seen as another A section. Let's take a listen to that now. It's very short, and you won't hear the main theme in its full form. You'll just hear little snippets of the motif. So that's it. That's the entire return of that A theme, just 10 measures long. But it moves right into another return of B. The B section in a sonata rondo form is often called an episode. So the B section was episode 1. This is the return of episode 1. And it starts just as the first B section did, with that lovely subordinate theme that we heard earlier. One of the other techniques that Mozart uses in this movement that is common in the classical period, and certainly for Mozart to use, is elision. And what he does is at the end of this B section, he elides its cadence, its finishing point, with the beginning of the return of A. So let's take a listen to that so you can hear how those cadences overlap. So hopefully you could hear that the B section was ending just as the A section was beginning. And this return of the A section, the bookend of the movement, starts just as the first section in the movement began. In fact, this last A section is almost an exact replication of the exposition of that A section at the very beginning. In fact, it only differs by 2 measures, and that's because the closing theme at the end is just ever so slightly different than we heard in the very beginning. Now, sometimes in a sonata rondo form, as I mentioned earlier, this last A section is seen as a coda, but in this case, Mozart has a very definite A section and a coda, and we're going to listen to how you can tell very definitively that this A section has ended and a coda has begun, because you will hear yet again that closing theme from the very first A section marking the end of something, and then we'll be moving into the coda. Let's take a listen to that now. So as you can hear there, that closing theme goes right into these lovely ascending arpeggio patterns by the soloist, and then we know we're right into the coda. One thing that's different about this rondo than other sonata rondos that Mozart wrote is that there is no cadenza for the soloist here. It would be typical to have a cadenza for the soloist in a concerto and in the finale of a concerto, but there is no cadenza in this finale, but there is a fairly extended coda that's over 50 measures long, and it uses material from episode 1 from the B section, and then we hear a final restatement of the entire rondo theme that we heard at the very beginning of that very first A section. And I'd like to play that for you now, and then I'll let it run just until the very end of the piece so you can hear how it finishes off. So there you have it, Mozart's third movement of the Clarinet Concerto, a very typical and almost textbook case of sonata rondo form in the classical era. It has all the requisite parts. And all the requisite key areas, by the way. Almost all of the areas are in the tonic, although in the B section we move into the dominant, and then in our middle C section we went to the relative minor, which is quite typical. And the only thing missing is a cadenza, but other than that, it's a really quite a symmetrical, lovely, delightful piece of music, and I hope you enjoyed it.